Hello and welcome to Unsourced Wall. My name is Elvis, and as always, I am your host. Alright, so this has been kind of a week. We're actually starting to see new comics come out digitally and otherwise, so that is great. We have at least one new release from DC that I was kind of hoping they would get the jump on. Now, I know that there has been a lot of controversy about DC doing this. I still think it's a good idea. I still think that it's a really nice idea that they're also not just completely beholden to Diamond themselves, although Diamond is playing a part in this as well, and that they are looking for other avenues to distribute. And it's also great that we're seeing other companies do this like Boom and Image and IDW. They're all jumping in and trying to get publishing moving again, getting series, stories, and issues out there. So good luck to all of them, and well, kudos to that. And I think the only thing in comic news that really made waves was the rumor that Marvel Studios is going to be adapting, or at least trying to adapt, the Ultimate Comics event Ultimatum, written by Jeff Loeb. And honestly, even if the rumor is true, I think that there's a lot of hubbub about it that is unnecessary, that is honestly really kind of over the top and exaggerated. Because think about it, we had Civil War, which was based on a really crappy event as well, an event that no one really liked, but somehow made waves and bank and had lots of influence on the line at the time, much like Ultimatum. And then Marvel Studios got their hand on it and made it an overly expensive, boring waste of time and money. So I expect the exact same thing if they do Ultimatum. Like, they're just going to take kernel of the idea, probably the whole Magneto trying to take over the world on a global scale kind of thing as a way to introduce the X-Men, even though that was like the second time that Ultimate Magneto did that within the Ultimate Comics line, so it was really watered down then. But I can see that being the reason why they would even approach Ultimatum, because the huge Magneto story, because it does feature a centralized Avenger-style cast and threat, and if you wanted to introduce the X-Men, it would be a huge bombastic way of doing that. So even though the rumor is unconfirmed, I think that probably gives it a little bit more credence, because we are wondering how they're going to introduce the X-Men and mutants into the MCU and make it seem fresh. So, but I don't expect it to be interesting or outrageous or just any way engaging, either if it's bad, awful, terrible, or even decent. I expect it to be same baseline, boring porridge like Civil War was. So you can all calm down now. And that's really it about news. And this is breaking news to me, so I'm adding this in later. So if you notice audio dip or a shift in quality, that's the reason why. But it seems that acclaimed, amazing artist, famed for doing the art on the insanely great Denny O'Neil version of The Question, Dennis Cohen, has been admitted to the ER. Bill Stankiewicz posted on his Facebook page. Join me in wishing him all the best. Hopefully I don't have to update this later. I have to cut this part out. Hopefully he recovers and that we hear good news from this soon. So best wishes to him and his family and his friends. And, just God be with you, honestly. Now let's head on into what I read this week, because there's actually stuff coming out. Let me just go through the digital first ones again. We have two new ones. We have The Flash, Fastest Man Alive by Gail Simone, which I have to say is pretty much just a slightly better version of the CW show. I'm pretty sure Gail Simone likes the CW show. Pretty sure she's taken a lot of inspiration from that show, because not only does it had the same kind of tone, but Barry is very much the whole Grant Gustiny, Ducky from Pretty in Pink style character that he is on the show, or at least he was in the early seasons before I just completely dropped it. He's very kind of quirky and gimmicky and kind of stuttery and very kind of awkward and okay. I mean, I never hated that aspect in total. I just hated how they used it to play up really cheap romantic tropes that are completely passé and so clearly haven't aged well at all. Now, what Gail Simone brings to the table and why it's a slightly better version is that it doesn't really override what makes Barry, or at least the Flash in general, an interesting superhero, an engaging superhero. Like, it allows that awkward, gimmicky nature to sort of give some flavor to the story, but Barry is still very much a confident, determined, and honestly very proactive superhero. It's not something where he's like stewing in his own neuroses while a bunch of quirky, colorful characters quip around him like in the show. He's very much the Flash, and he's getting down to business. And that's what I think Barry is very underrated at, is that he knows when to, really put his mind forward into the superheroics, into the situation at hand, and how to deal with the stakes and the dramatic tension. It's very similar to Superman. And I think I've always described Barry as Clark Kent, but just runs, because they have the same kind of sensibility. They're very mild-mannered, they're very kind of, I guess, slightly kind of dorky, but they really do put all their passion into the altruistic quotient of being a superhero. And I think that's what this story gets the best. It's just a little bit too fluffy and a little bit too comedic and humorous and like wannabe kind of chirpy for my taste. It's not bad. It's definitely not as bad as the Harley Quinn Wonder Woman digital first from last week, but it could be a lot better. The story itself isn't that engaging. It's not really a kind of a classic start off for a Flash story. He does have some good banter with Iris West, which is fun. I like their romance, and I think that not having the baggage the CW show has really lends itself to a nice little back and forth, and it's nicely romantic. I like that a lot. But the story itself is unengaging. The situation isn't that exciting, and Barry, like I said, is hindered by just being like really, really goofy, and it's not something that really kind of pulls you in. So that's a shame, but it's off to a mediocre start. I will keep up with it, so hopefully it gets better from here. And I also read the next issue of Superman Men of Tomorrow by Robert Venditti, and it's slightly worse than last week's. Last week, while it had some issues with density and like substance, it really felt very kind of pinpointing and very weighty when it comes to Superman stuff, with his morality, with the message, with the ideals, and also with the supporting cast, who are all very enjoyable and they all get their moment to shine. Meanwhile, this one, it feels very wafting. The situation is a lot less thrilling. Like last week we had Parasite, and we had all the classic tropes that you get for a Parasite story. In this one we get the gambler who was a JSA villain, and he's just doing like the most uninteresting thing. And we also have like a corrupt politician who only appears for like 2 pages. So again, it doesn't really draw you in. But there's a Parasite, you get the kind of exciting kind of blockbuster idea of it. In this one, you get kind of nothing. There's nothing to grab onto. There are some really fun moments with Clark Kent and Superman. Like I said, what this issue and last issue gets right is that there are a few beats where like, yeah, this is what I want on a Superman story. The rest of it just isn't that interesting to read at all. It really isn't. So it's a shame. It really is. There are times when it was just kind of bored because it just felt very low key. And I don't mean I want something that is extremely over the top and kind of blockbuster, but I want something that is going to feel like it has some heft to it. And this didn't. It really didn't. And the last digital first I read was Swamp Thing New Roots by Mark Russell. And it was honestly pretty touch and go, but at the end of it, I really loved it. I thought that it was probably one of the best Swamp Thing stories I have ever read, at least in the last couple of years. Really scratched an itch for me. I'm a huge fan and booster for the original Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson run. Like that whole We Want to Be kind of EC horror style run that, before it became like all very intellectual and weighty and poetic and dramatic, like when it was just a cut and dry monster book that knew what it wanted to do, and it knew when to place certain emotional beats to like make it hit. It felt very blunt, very kind of early Bronze Agey, but in the best way possible. And that's what I love about that run. That's what I love about Len Wein's take. I know that a lot of other runs get so much more like respect, like this is when Swamp Thing matured, but no, I think Swamp Thing in its down and dirty origins was probably like the encapsulation for the character to me. Like it's a pure monster book at heart, and that's what makes it stick out to me. And Mark Russell understands that completely. It felt like such a throwback to the Wein and Wrightson stuff, and I love it. I fell in love with it. And it begins kind of shaky. It feels a lot more loose than I expected, and I'm wondering if Russell took a while to get his bearings, because right at the midpoint it turns into like this old school like crime suspense stories, shock suspense stories, Tales from the Crypt style narrative where you see the dread building up, where it's slightly very darkly comedic, and it just punches in the face with like this scathing twist, and it's beautiful. It's wonderful. It feels right at home in Swamp Thing. I do hope that we see a lot more of it develop. I'm not saying that I want like more Alan Moore style stuff or anything like that, but I think that with this issue we spent a little bit too much time setting up the twist, and so we spent a lot of time away from Swamp Thing, which is never really a problem in the original comics where we're always in his head. And we are in his head in this issue, but it feels a little bit more kind of segregated. It's not something that really kind of draws you into Swamp Thing to Alec Holland's plight, and that's a shame, because I really do like Alec. I like him as Swamp Thing. I like how he's kind of trapped in his inner trauma, and we do get a lot of that, and it does provide for a great little ending beat, but I wish we could have more of that, because it did feel like it was a separate story that just had Swamp Thing kind of drifting through it. So I'm excited for next week. It was a great start, and it's probably my favorite of the digital first line overall. I know I've been kind of off on Mark Russell for a little bit here and there, but this was probably one of my favorite things for him in a long time. And so let me just give some grades here. For The Flash, Fastest Man Alive, I'm going to give it 2 thumbs middle. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great. It wasn't that interesting, but it was mediocre, so 2 thumbs middle. Superman, Man of Tomorrow, I'm going to give it 1 thumb middle, 1 thumb down. I'm giving that thumb down because the first issue showed where this could go, and this was a drop from that, so I'm not going to give it any more points than I have to. I do think this series can be better. It hasn't been great yet, but it can be better than this. And Swamp Thing New Roots, 2 thumbs up, because it was a delight. And the last thing I read this week is The Dreaming number 20 by Cy Spurrier and Bilquis Evely, and it is their last issue on the amazing run they've had on The Dreaming. And honestly, it's going to take me months, maybe years, to really decode this run. It has been such an insane delight. It's gone through my mind and out through my ears in all ways possible, because it is probably the culmination of Spurrier's topsy-turvy, twisty-turny writing style. I think that being about stories, the nature of fiction, and nature of dreams, nature of meaning, nature of symbols, let him run loose in a way I haven't seen before. But it let him run loose in a way that just fit the tone of the world and the tone of the characters. 'Cause a lot of times he does this in other series like Crossed or any kind of other big 2 run he's ever had, and it doesn't work quite as well because he has to really force it, and it makes it feel like it's all fumbling apart, while in The Dreaming it definitely feels more at home, and it kind of earns its keep. It gives it a little bit more bite, because that's what you're expecting from this category of book, from the Sandman universe, and he doesn't disappoint at all. I think that where this issue has to be commended is that it really tries hard to stick the landing. It plays with the format, it plays with the layouts, it plays with the pages to fit in as much content and context and substance as it can to really make this issue land and try to find closure to the dozens of plot threads that have been going on. And even then, it does leave a lot of things open, but it feels more natural at that, because you know that one of the main themes, or at least one of the main messages, is that these stories go on, but now they are still unbridled, they are still roaming free, because that's what dreams should be. They should be free, they should be allowed to coalesce and to evolve and to grow, and that is great. It's great, and I think that it nails it as much as it can. It does feel a little bit too easy at times. It feels like a huge Deus Ex Machina, but it kind of works, because again, this is the kind of story that this is. So knowing that cliche is happening while you're commenting on cliches is usually very kind of lax and lazy to me, but it kind of pulls it off in this, so I can excuse it. And the last kind of epilogue pages are such a great bookend. They're such a great bookend to where this series began in the Sandman universe one-shot 2 years ago, that I love that. I love full circle kind of stuff, and it does leave the characters in a place where they're continuing to develop, but they're developing in a way that is natural and safe and organic. I think Spurrier and Evely have done something really special with this series, and I'm sad to see them go, but what they created was something also pretty special, and I'm glad that I was able to read it, and I'm gonna have a blast rereading this over the next couple of years until who knows when, because I love this series that much. So overall, 2 thumbs up, and bless Ziggy. I'm glad he made it all the way to the end. And it seems that he, Dora, and that one fire demon are a throuple of some sort, so that's fun as hell. Go them! So anyway, that's it for what I read this week. There's still nothing to watch, and I didn't answer any questions this week because this was kind of last minute. I had kind of a rough couple of days, nothing too serious, but just emotionally and mentally taxing. So thank you so much for listening, and as always, I want to say thank you to everyone out there who's ever sent in a question, comment, or topic. It means so much to me. So hopefully next week I'll be in a better place to ask for questions from you, so that I can just get some more back and forth, more interaction here, because I always really enjoy that, and it means a lot. So thank you again so much. And if anyone out there has their own questions, comments, or topics, you want to find me on Twitter at THE_SNICKMAN. I'll give a shout out to the cover artist for the show at DOTEMCEE. Please check them out. And I'll give a shout out to Eggmath on Twitter, because I didn't mention you last week. Sorry for that. Complete oversight. So hopefully you're not too mad at that if you listen to that episode. And I think that's about it. Hope you have a great week, and see you again next time.